Hello, folks, and welcome to this live telephone town hall meeting with your Congressman, Tom Malinowski, representing you in New Jersey's 7th Congressional District. Thanks so much for those of you who are on early. We are dialing out to tens of thousands of your fellow constituents in the 7th Congressional District right now. Let's see, 75,491 households around the 7th Congressional District. We're dialing out right now. We'll be getting started in just a moment. To submit a question for our live Q&A today with your congressman, all you have to do is press 0 on your phone. Give your question to an operator. They'll take down some notes and put you in the queue. Then in a few minutes here, we're going to start taking questions live and asking Representative Malinowski to answer those questions. So if you're just joining us, this is a live virtual forum. We'll get some updates from your congressman in a moment here, and then we'll spend the rest of our 1-hour forum on Q&A. The majority of our forum today will be spent answering your questions. So to submit a question, you just press 0. You may have questions about the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed in November of last year. You may have questions about any current legislation being debated in Congress, about supply chain issues, or how Congress is combating the ongoing pandemic. If you have questions on any of those topics or any other topics, please press 0 on your phone to give your question to an operator. You may have taken part in one of these forums before. We've held events like this to help with disaster relief, to help make sure everybody got their stimulus checks. This one's going to be a very general forum, so it's going to be guided by your questions. So if you have any questions for your congressman, press 0, give your question to an operator. Again, we're going to be taking those live. Now, if you're not comfortable asking your question live, no worries. Let your operator know if you prefer to have me read your question over the air instead of bringing you live on the air. Whatever's more comfortable for you is fine with us. Again, you just press 0 to give your question to an operator. They'll take down some notes. We're happy to bring you live into the forum to ask your question, but if you prefer to have your question read, I'm happy to do that. Just let your operator know that you want the moderator to read your question if that's your preference. Again, 0, however you want to submit a question, it's 0. One more thing here, folks. If you would like to get email updates from Congressman Malinowski's office, you can press 7 on your phone, and that'll take you to another operator pool that's ready to take down your email address and get you occasional email updates from your representative. So if you'd like to be kept updated on the issues that affect you from D.C., you can press 7. Give your email address to an operator. We'll get you signed up for those occasional email updates so that you're up to speed on what's the issues that affect you in New Jersey's 7th Congressional District. Also, if you're not comfortable pressing 7 and giving your email address to an operator on this forum, you can visit the Congressman's website at malinowski.house.gov/contact/newsletter-subscribe, or just go to malinowski.house.gov, and it's easy to find that contact and newsletter subscription area. And again, you can find more about what the Congressman is doing at malinowski.house.gov. And finally, folks, we can assist with accessing public benefits such as Social Security and Medicare, as well as passports and visas, immigration and naturalization services, veterans benefits, or in resolving issues with federal agencies such as the IRS and FEMA. So if you need casework, if you need the Congressman's office to help you with a federal agency and an issue that you're experiencing, you can go to malinowski.house.gov/casework if you need that kind of assistance, or you can stay on the forum. At the end of our forum in an hour here, you can leave a voicemail message for the Congressman's office, and they'll be able to get back to you so long as you leave contact information in that voicemail. Again, we'll be doing that at the end of the forum if we don't get your questions answered or if you need additional assistance. That's enough for me, folks. Again, 0 to submit a question for Q&A, 7 to get email updates from your congressman. It's my pleasure to kick off this live forum by turning it over to your congressman, Tom Malinowski. Please go ahead, Representative.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody who's joined us this evening. I've done over 100 of these public town hall meetings since I was elected, so since the beginning of 2019. Some of them have been live, some have been virtual, more often virtual, obviously, at these moments when we're dealing with COVID, but they're all incredibly important to me as a chance to let you know what we're doing in Washington, and even more important to hear your questions and concerns. So today, I wanted to start us off by talking a little bit about what we're doing this week in Congress and how it relates to our economy. This week, we are focusing particularly on the challenge of fixing our supply chains, of bringing our supply chains home for obvious reasons that we're all experiencing right now. Looking back on the last 2 years, I would say that But when the pandemic hit us in 2020 and 2021, we were basically dealing with a house on fire. The pandemic shut down the economy. It caused massive unemployment. It was an emergency, and so we responded on an emergency basis. We helped our small businesses stay afloat and keep their employees on payroll through the Paycheck Protection Program. We sent out stimulus checks and tax credits to folks with kids to make sure that we had money in our pockets, unemployment benefits to make sure that people could make ends meet through those worst days of the pandemic. Something that got a little less attention but was really important for us back in New Jersey that I worked on was making sure that the federal government helped out our county and municipal governments with the revenue shortfalls that they were facing. Every town in my congressional district got a little bit of relief, which meant that they didn't have to raise property taxes to keep services going for all of us. The result of all of that was actually something pretty remarkable. This was the first massive economic crisis that we have had as a country in which people emerged at the back end with, on average, more money than we had when we started out. Poverty in America actually fell by almost half in the first 2 years of the pandemic, and that's an incredibly good thing. But just putting out the fire was not enough. The house was damaged by the pandemic, and the pandemic exposed a lot of structural problems that we were neglecting before. Our infrastructure, which had been neglected for many years, crumbling roads and bridges and mass transit, and years of shifting manufacturing and manufacturing jobs to other countries. And we saw the consequences of that, particularly in the early days of the pandemic when we had all those shortages of personal protective equipment, and we're seeing it today when people have money to spend, but we still have factories overseas shut down because of the coronavirus. We have people who have not gone back to work in the United States. We have industries that are too far away from us and not responding to our needs. So if our job in the first couple of years was to put out the fire, our job this year, I think, is to fix the house. It's to deal with these structural problems in our economy so that we are resilient, so that we are ready for the next crisis. And so in addition to saving jobs, we also save people's paychecks. So what are we doing about that? Number one, what we have already done was pass the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. This is something that has eluded presidents and Congresses of both parties for decades. We got it done, and it's going to mean a tremendous amount of our tax dollars actually coming back to New Jersey for a change. My number one priority, as many of you know, in infrastructure was getting the money to build that Hudson River Tunnel between New Jersey and New York so that we still have trains running under the Hudson River 10 years, 20, 40, 50 years from now. That is done. We've gotten that. And the money from the infrastructure bill is going to do a whole bunch of other things that we will feel in our communities, from fixing potholes and roads, smaller bridges in all of our communities, to really important water infrastructure projects to deal with flood control, broadband internet in the parts of New Jersey where that's still an issue, and so much more. The next challenge, and again, this is what we're working on this week, is dealing with those supply chains. A few months ago actually, I sat down with a small bipartisan group of members in the House, including Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger from Illinois, and we started writing a section of this bill that we are going to be passing in the House this week. What we are going to do is to create in the Department of Commerce a brand new office, a brand new program to support supply chain resiliency in the United States. Now, why is this important? We've all probably read at this point about the shortage of microchips. America used to produce about 37% of the microchips that we use in our economy. That's down to 13%, but it's actually 0% produced in the United States of the most sophisticated microchips that we use in our phones, our cars, in high-tech stuff. The average electrical car has about 2,000 of these sophisticated microchips, none of which are produced in the United States. The average gas-powered car, 600 microchips. And demand for chips is now 20% in excess of supply. 1/3 of the inflation that we are experiencing in our economy right now is car prices, and that is almost all because of the microchip shortage. And it's not just the microchips. Pfizer gets about 90% of its pharmaceutical ingredients from China. Battery technology, battery materials, mostly not made in the United States. Key components of solar panels, and I'm very committed to moving towards clean energy. I want to encourage solar energy, but the key components of solar panels are made in China as well. We mentioned personal protective equipment. We experienced that in the early days of the crisis. So what we're trying to do is to create an office at the Commerce Department that will be backed over 5 years with $45 billion to make grants, loans, and loan guarantees to jumpstart manufacturing in the United States of critical goods and products and materials that are essential to our national security and to our economic security. We've done this before in our country successfully. There was a little company about 15 years ago that was making a really expensive electric sports car, and they got a $465 million loan from the federal government. And today, Tesla is one of the greatest companies in America and the world. They paid back that loan with interest 9 years early. Taxpayers made a profit on that investment, and a critical industry in the United States, American workers, was jump-started. That's what we want to do on a much larger scale to bring manufacturing home to the United States. And I wrote that part of the bill. I'm going to work really, really hard to get it not just through the House, but through the Senate, where we also have support, and to the President for his signature. So happy to talk about that. A lot of other stuff going on. I was in Ukraine last week. I've been focused a lot on trying to make sure that we don't have a major war in Europe, working with Republicans and Democrats who are united on this in the United States Congress, still working on some of the key pieces of that bill, the Build Back Better bill that didn't make it through the Senate, but that would be important to New Jersey, like the SALT deduction, and a lot of other things that you guys may want to ask me about. So with that, would love to hear your thoughts and questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the hour that we have. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, Representative. Thank you again, and thanks to our constituents in the 7th Congressional District for joining us for this 1-hour forum. We're going to spend the rest of the time on Q&A, and we've already got some great questions lined up. Mark in Flemington, William, web registrant, and Bill in Basking Ridge are our first three. But I wanted to remind folks that if you need more information on the work the Congressman does in Congress, you can go to malinowski.house.gov, and if you'd like to be kept regularly updated on that work, press 7. Give your email address to an operator so we can keep you updated electronically moving forward. All right, Mark in Flemington, you are live, and thank you so much for joining our forum. You're on with the Congressman.
Hey, Congressman Malinowski, it's Mark. Great to hear your voice.
Mark.
Thank you so much for all you're doing. I really appreciate that update and really appreciate your focus on Ukraine and on the supply chain. And you and I and Mr. Ramirez have had a number of exchanges and conversations around drug pricing. As a pharmacist, concerns me greatly. And as someone who cares deeply about patients, studied this issue quite extensively and have connected you and your team to many people that have studied it even more extensively than I have. I want to understand from you and from some of your colleagues, what are you doing around pharmacy benefit managers? Because if we look at the National Health Expenditure data that just came out, the percentage of drug price increase fairly low and stable, much less than hospital costs, physician services costs, but yet patients pay with benefit design much more out of pocket, which is where they see the prices, than they would for, say, a physician service or a hospital service. And part of that challenge is the middlemen, the pharmacy benefit managers, as we know, and as you know very, very, very well, and I know you're very, very smart in this issue. We really need to get down to the affordability at the pharmacy counter for these patients. Can you let me know and let the rest of the constituents know, how are you digging into that? Because that's really the essence of the challenge that we have on the front lines.
Yeah. Well, this is, and thank you so much for raising that, Mark, and you and I have discussed this before, and you know more about it than I do. I will certainly admit that from the get-go. It's a complicated problem. There's not, we're all concerned, and I think many people on this call are concerned by the high cost of prescription drugs in the United States. And we all know that Americans pay more than people in most other countries. We also know, to be fair to our drug manufacturers, that most of the research and development for pharmaceutical drugs is done in the United States by our private sector. We also know we have an incredibly complicated system with a lot of middlemen, including the PBMs, which you just raised. This is one reason I am disappointed that we were not able to make more progress on that, whatever you want to call it, Build Back Better bill or whatever, because it did actually begin to attack this problem from multiple vantage points. As you know, I do support, as the overwhelming majority of Americans support, reform to drug pricing, to allow greater market negotiation between Medicare and our large pharmaceutical companies. I get disturbed when I see, we had just to give folks one example, one of our big pharmaceutical companies, Biogen, recently developing a drug for Alzheimer's, which would have cost $56,000, $60,000 a year per patient, which a significant share of the millions of Americans who suffer from Alzheimer's would probably have wanted to get. And at that price, Medicare would have gone bankrupt. And we have a system where pharmaceutical companies can name their price, and something has got to give there. But as you and others have pointed out, that is far from the only part of the problem, that we do also have to deal with this complex system of middlemen who keep a lot of the discounts that pharmaceutical companies offer for themselves rather than passing them down to patients. This is why we do have to, whether it's through the Build Back Better bill or just a bill that simply deals with pharmaceutical drug pricing, we have to get back to this issue in the Congress. Thanks.
Thank you again. Appreciate you, Representative. And thank you again, Mark, for being on and being such a great advocate for patients. Thanks so much. We're going to go right to William next. And William, looks like you registered for our call online. Welcome. And what's your question for the Congressman?
Thank you. William Healy, the New Jersey Alliance for Action, resident of Raritan Township. Congressman, could you speak briefly to the major infrastructure projects that are going to benefit the 7th District as a result of the bill?
Thank you so much, William. We don't know the exact projects yet, with the exception of some of the really big ones like the Gateway Tunnel. Another one that we know is going to benefit the district is a major Army Corps of Engineer project to control flooding along the Greenbrook and Raritan rivers. We just got full funding to complete that essential program, which will benefit a lot of folks, particularly in Somerset County, that have been experiencing flooding there for many, many years. I'm hopeful we will also get approval for a similar Army Corps project that we would certainly have funding for under this bill to deal with flooding along the Raritan River, which has affected communities like Cranford and Milburn way too many times over the years. I have worked with our county and municipal planning authorities to identify their top priority projects for fixing up roads and repairing bridges. But the priorities are set by them. I'm not the person who is going to decide which road gets fixed first and I shouldn't be. That is the job of our local elected officials who are responsible to all of you in making those decisions. So what we are doing right now is fanning out across the district, talking to our mayors, talking to our county commissioners, talking to the planning officials. We've told them, make your priority lists, make your wish lists, what you believe in consultation with your constituents the priorities should be. I will fight to get you those grants. And so we're at that stage right now of consulting with them to make sure that we're identifying the right things. I would encourage everybody, knowing that we are going to get more federal support, to go to your town council meetings, to be in touch with your local officials, tell them what your priorities are as well, whether it's transportation projects, mass transit, environmental projects, flood control, broadband internet, all of these things we have funding for in the bill, and it's got to be locally driven. It's got to be bottom up rather than Washington or me deciding exactly what gets done. Just a brief addendum to that. We are also, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, passing the 2023 budget for the federal government. And in that bill, I was able to get support for 10 specific projects across the district, again, based on priorities identified by our municipalities. And if you go on our website, you can see the projects that we identified. There are a few in every county that I represent, and they're all shovel-ready projects that will be benefiting constituents hopefully within the next year.
Excellent. Thank you so much for taking that one on for us. And William, thank you for being a part of our forum. Much appreciated. Bill is up next from Basking Ridge. Hey, Bill, thanks for waiting. You're up.
Tom, a little preamble first. I spent most of my business career making first radio tubes and then semiconductors. And for the last 20 years of my career, I was helping to build up our manufacturing facilities in the Far East. I always felt somewhat guilty about that, but that was my job. And I'm really happy to hear you pushing legislation that will help bring back this manufacturing to the United States. It's extrememly important. Okay, now my question. I saw a headline this morning that Joe Manchin had said that the Build Back Better bill was dead, and what we really needed was tax reform. And I didn't have a chance to read anything further about that. But if Build Back Better really is dead as a specific bill, is there a chance that there would be a standalone bill on climate where I understand Manchin is supportive?
Thanks so much for the question, Bill. You mentioned the Far East and semiconductors. The country that supplies most of our high-end semiconductors is Taiwan. It's a wonderful place. It's a democracy, close to the United States, but as many people know, it is subject to very serious threats right now from the government of China. Many people fear that one day there will be a war between China and Taiwan if China tries to take Taiwan back. And on top of all the other costs of such a terrible war, it would potentially shut down the supply of semiconductors to the United States. And so another argument, a national security argument for bringing some of these critical things home, things that are absolutely essential to our security. On your question, I don't care what you call it. The reason we put everything in that one big bill, the Build Back Better bill, was all of these crazy rules in the Senate, the filibuster. It made it easier to pass everything in one bill because you get one chance a year to pass a bill that does not have to go through the filibuster rules where you have to get 60 votes. So that was the reason for that. But I think there are a lot of parts, there are a lot of things in that bill that are very popular that the overwhelming majority of Americans support, and that we ought to be able to get 60 votes for, especially if moderate, middle-of-the-road guys like Joe Manchin are with us. Tax reform, we should absolutely do a tax reform bill, and if we do, I'd like to make sure we get back the SALT deduction as part of that. I'm still working on that. I'd like to get corporate tax reform. I think most Americans are offended when they read that a huge corporation like Amazon gets away with paying no taxes. That's just wrong. And, we've got a deficit. We've got investments that we need to make in infrastructure, and big corporations ought to pay their fair share. Most people agree. And then on climate, we just had some climate change in the 7th District of New Jersey. It came to us as 4 feet of water in our basements, many of us, when Hurricane Ida hit us. This is real. This is not some future thing. This is about making sure that the weather doesn't kill us. And yes, I'd like to be able to work with the Senate on a sensible, free market-based bill that, number one, makes America the leader of the world in clean energy, which is going to create jobs. It's going to move us into the future. And number two, that's going to protect families in New Jersey from these weather events that are getting more and more and more frequent. That's what climate change is. Thank you.
Thank you again, Congressman, and thank you to Bill for being a part of our forum. Really great questions today. Really appreciate everybody's participation. Amy in Asbury, you're up next. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks. This is Amy. I'm calling to ask whether Congress has given up on the voting rights protections. I'm really concerned that Black and brown voters will not have their votes counted if the state's new laws they're allowed to go through, and also if states' laws saying we can choose the winner here regardless of what the electorate has chosen. So I'm just wondering about those voting issues and how we could help.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, for raising that, and I'm concerned about it. We certainly have not given up. Everything is hard in Congress, but we've managed to pass tough legislation in the last year. What I'm particularly focused on, and I know it's not the whole problem, but I think it's the most acute problem, is this effort in a number of states across the country to try to do through legislation or by simply appointing or electing new election officials what, to put it bluntly, the rioters tried to do through violence on January 6th, to put people in a position to overturn a future election against the will of the majority of the people who actually vote. We have arcane election rules in this country that go back to the 19th century, which are confusing, hard to interpret. The drama on January 6th was partly caused by that. And so we do have actually a really promising bipartisan effort right now, Republicans and Democrats in the Senate and the House, working on, number one, making sure that in the next presidential election, the states there's not going to be any funny business in the states, that if the majority of the people in Nevada or Wisconsin or Georgia vote for a particular candidate, that's the candidate who will get the electoral votes from that state, even if the state legislature is unhappy with the result. And number two, that when those electors are sent to the Congress to be certified, that we have a ceremony, as we have had for every election apart from the last one, without drama, without anybody saying the vice president can somehow overturn an election, as the former president recently acknowledged he tried to do. We want to make sure the American people elect the next president, that the majority rules, and that nobody in this country is in a position change the result just because they don't like it. And I think we've got bipartisan support, for legislation that will give us that reassurance. There won't be an election subverted in America in the future. So that's what we're focused on. There are other things that have been harder. I think it's essential that we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, for example. That's basically the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that Martin Luther King marched for, that was renewed almost unanimously in the House and Senate repeatedly until things got political in the last few years. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that thing that we have been doing ever since 1965. So I'm going to keep at it. Thanks for asking.
Appreciate you again. Thank you, Congressman, and thank you again for the question from Amy. Very much appreciate your participation. Going to take a quick moment here. We are at the halfway mark of our hour-long forum. We've got 30 minutes left, so if you wanted to get email updates from the Congressman, you can do that in a couple of ways. You can press 7 on this phone call, speak to an operator, give them your email address. We'll get you signed up for that e-newsletter. You can also go to malinowski.house.gov. And I wanted to give a quick shout-out to Sophia in Union, New Jersey. It looks like you could probably use the Congressman's assistance. You can go and request assistance by going to malinowski.house.gov/casework to get assistance with federal office, and it sounds like that's what you need. So again, malinowski.house.gov/casework, or Sophia and anybody else, you can also stay on the phone. At the end of this half hour, you'll have an opportunity to go directly to the voicemail system when we wrap this call, and you can leave a voicemail message with your name, your question, concern, or need, and then make sure you leave your phone number, some contact information so we can reach back out to you. So thanks, Sophia, and we'll definitely get you taken care of if you leave a message, or go to, again, malinowski.house.gov/casework. All right, let's get back to Q&A. We've got our next one coming to us from David in Westfield. David, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Congressman, thank you. Do you think it's appropriate for members of Congress to short sell stocks, bet against the American economy, and personally profit from the failure of American companies?
Thanks, David. I almost a year ago sponsored legislation that says it's not appropriate for members of Congress to be invested in the stock market, period, unless they have a completely blind trust. And pending the passage of that legislation, I put all of my life savings in a blind trust where I have no idea how it's invested. I believe everybody should support that position, anybody who's in Congress and anybody who is seeking the support of the American people to be in Congress. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you again, Congressman. And we'll get to our next question right away from Miriam in Millington. Hey, Miriam, you're up. Go ahead.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for all that you do. And I'm a former middle school teacher, so I know that bullies become emboldened when there are no consequences for their actions. And it's with a lot of fear that I learn of all the hate crimes, which seem to be accelerating at this point in time in our country. So my question is, what can the Congress or the executive branch do to stop this stuff? It's really getting scary.
Well, that's a good and very difficult question. I think one thing we can do is try to set a better example in our own behavior. There's if you look at what's happening in our politics in our country right now, over the last several years, the partisanship, the anger, the vitriol, and in some cases actually bullying at a very high level. The example that sets for our children when they see public officials engaging in that kind of behavior to each other, to constituents, to journalists, I think is terrible. In a way, I think the most important thing we can do is just to try, even as we debate difficult issues, even as we argue with each other, to try to make the arguments about substance, about policy, about serious matters, and not and not about personal attacks that I think when our children see adults behaving that way, they emulate in ways that then basically become bullying. So that's where I would start. Let's just start by setting a good example as leaders. Thank you.
Thank you again. Appreciate you, Congressman. Reminder, folks, 7 to get email updates, and we're going to go to our next one from Evan in Bridgewater. Evan, welcome to the forum. You're on with Congressman Malinowski.
Hello, my name is Evan Kabuchi, and I'm a 10-year-old AOL scout in Bridgewater.
Hi, Evan.
Oh, thanks so much for joining us. What's your question for the Congressman, Evan?
My question is, when the Congressman was a child, did he ever think or dream that he would become a congressman of his state?
Oh, wow. Good one. Thank you, Evan. Congressman? Wow. Well, when I was a child, when I was just a few years younger than you, Evan, when I was 6 years old, I came to America. I was born in Poland. And Poland at that time was a communist country. It was a dictatorship. Nobody could become a congressman. Nobody could vote. Nobody had a chance to choose their leaders. And so when I came to America, even though I was just a kid, I kind of understood that what we have here in America is really, really special. I took the Oath of Citizenship when I was exactly your age, when I was 10 years old, which means I went to a courthouse and I raised my hand and I had to pledge that I would support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And that's exactly the same oath that you take when you get elected to Congress or even when you're elected president. So, I was thinking about this stuff at your age and thinking about, not maybe I'd be a congressman someday, but how special it is to live in a democracy and how I wanted somehow to be part of that when I grew up. And I was lucky enough to have a chance, and I hope that you know that you will have that chance as well. And I hope you're looking forward 8 years from now to the day when you get to cast your first vote as a citizen of the United States for president, for Congress, and for all of the elected officials who are supposed to be representing you.
Thank you, Congressman. And Evan, thanks so much for being a part of our forum. We've run a lot of forums like this, and it's always a real joy to hear from a young person who's interested. And so thanks so much for being a part of our call tonight. Thank you, Evan. We're going to go to Sally in Milford up next here, who's asked me to read this question for you, Congressman. She asked, what do you think is the most effective way citizens can protect democracy? And that's from Sally in Milford.
Well, thank you so much, Sally. I'm going to start with something obvious, and that's the most effective way for citizens to protect democracy is to take part in the democracy by voting, by running for office, by volunteering for not just political campaigns, but all the organizations out there that hold politicians accountable, and making sure that when we take that oath to support and defend the Constitution that I just discussed with young Evan, that we mean it. And that oath has been tested many times in our country in recent years. I started out this session of Congress in Washington, D.C., being chased out of the chamber of the House of Representatives by a group of very violent people who were set on overturning a democratic election by violence. I'll never forget that, and I will never forget the feeling of beating them, of coming back to the floor of the House of Representatives that night to vote to certify the election as the people of the United States wanted us to do. So we're reminded every day these days that these freedoms and rights that we have, the rules and laws that make this democracy great, are fragile, that they need defending. And the best way to defend them is through the constant vigilance and participation of every single one of us as a citizen. They can't take it away from us if we're participating, if we refuse to give up on it. Thank you so much for asking that.
Thank you again, Congressman. Thank you, Sally. Appreciate your question, and we're going to jump right to our next one from Carol in Short Hills. Hey, Carol, thanks for joining. You're up.
Thank you for this session and all the others that I've attended, Tom. My question is, with the failure of the Senate to be able to pass the Build Back Better Act, what do you see a path forward for us getting our SALT deduction back?
Thank you. It's a great question. I'll be very straight with you, that was the best vehicle because it was a bill that could have gone through with 50 votes in the Senate. In other words, it didn't need the 60 votes. And, I try not to get partisan on these calls, but it's just an objective reality that the Republicans in the Senate and in the House are dead set against getting the SALT deduction back. So it would be hard to get 60 votes in the Senate for SALT relief under almost any circumstances. Now, so what's the solution? I have continued to put forward proposals on SALT that represent compromises that would return the deduction to every middle-class person in New Jersey, to the vast majority of our homeowners who are hurt by this, but not necessarily the richest among us. That can be done in a way that doesn't actually cost the federal government any money over 10 years. In fact, we might even actually get some revenue back if we do it that way that we could use to pay for other things. And so I'm trying to figure out a way of doing it that might actually be attractive to members of Congress from states not like New Jersey, where the SALT deduction isn't a big issue. And I think we've come up with some interesting ideas that we're looking to introduce in the next couple of weeks. And then the question is, can we work with Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, and others to break that big bill up into, a couple of bite-sized pieces that might still either get 60 votes or go through with a 50-vote threshold, but that are just going to be smaller and less sprawling and ambitious than that Build Back Better bill that Manchin ultimately didn't like. Will it happen? I don't know. Can it happen? Absolutely. My job is always to fight for the things that can happen and to increase the chances of success. And I'm going to keep on doing that. We've been successful on some things like infrastructure, and this is just one I'm going to have to keep on working on. Thanks.
Thank you again, Representative. And thanks for that last one. It came from Carol in Short Hills. We're going to go to Tom in Flanders next. Real quick, though, last call here for email updates. If you'd like to get an email updates from the Congressman's office, press 7 here. Speak to an operator, give them your email address. We're going to keep answering questions for another 15 minutes before we wrap. And a reminder that at the end, if you need constituent assistance and we haven't answered your question and you need other help, stay on the line. Leave us a voicemail message with your contact information. Congressman's office will reach out. Tom in Flanders has asked me to read this one for you, Representative. He says, is there any movement on moving back some of the COVID requirements for kids in school, including removing the mask mandates? Any thoughts on this one from Tom in Flanders?
Yeah. So two things, Tom. One, those are decisions that are made at the state and local level. So it's not something that I can directly influence as a member of Congress. That said, I don't want to cop out of your question. Personally, I do want us to move away from mask mandates for kids who are vaccinated in our schools. I believe in vaccine mandates, and we've had those in our schools forever, since we were kids and our parents and our grandparents were kids. But I do think that we need to pay much more attention at this point in the pandemic to the harm caused to our kids by constant school closures, by restrictions that we place on kids, including very, very strict masking requirements. And then you go to any restaurant and bar in any town in America, and the adults, we're wearing our mask for 10 seconds as we walk from the door to our seats, and then not after that. I just don't think it makes sense that we are asking more of our 11-year-olds than we are asking of 50-year-olds in bars. So that's my sentiment, and I've expressed that publicly before, but it is ultimately a decision that has to be made by our state and local officials. While please, everybody get vaccinated. Please get boosted. We are in the state of New Jersey. The recent hospital admission statistics show that over 60% of the folks who've had to be admitted to hospitals because of COVID were unvaccinated. About 30% were quote-unquote fully vaccinated, which means they just had their 2 shots, and less than 5% were fully boosted. That is a remarkable difference. We're getting about still between 2,000 and 3,000 people dying a day of COVID every single day in America, and most of that is preventable if only we could just come together without politics, without all of this nonsense that's out there on social media, and just do the thing that keeps people safe, and that's to get vaccinated. And then, that will also speed the day when we don't have these onerous mask requirements. Thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Thank you again, Congressman. Thank you to Tom in Flanders for our last one. Let's go to Summit for our next one. Hey, we've got Bodon on the line. You're live. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, Tom. Tom, based on your trip to Ukraine, what is your understanding of the kind of weapons and weapon systems that the Ukrainians need to try to defend themselves against the Russians?
We were there last week and spoke to the president, to the defense minister, the foreign minister, and we asked them what they needed. And, there are some things that in an ideal world they would have, sophisticated air defense systems, for example, but that cannot be provided in a matter of days or weeks because it takes time to integrate that kind of stuff into their army. Their soldiers would have to train up. So what we're focused on right now and what they're really asking for is simple stuff that can be delivered quickly, that can be distributed to their troops quickly, all to send a message to Putin and the Russians that if they do try to invade the country, they will pay a serious price. This is all about preventing a war. It's not about fighting the war. So simple things: ammunition, bullets, simple shoulder-fired air defense systems like Stinger missiles that they know how to use and can be provided very quickly, anti-tank missiles, defensive weapons that can take out invading tanks. Those are the sorts of things that the Biden administration, and not just the United States, importantly, but all of our NATO allies are providing to Ukraine. And as you know, we are also, together with our allies, threatening very serious economic sanctions if the Russians do invade. I'm more hopeful today than I was a week ago that Putin is getting the message. Again, the goal here is not to have a war. It is to prevent a war, and it's to make sure that the dictators like Putin around the world, including China, by the way, understand that it's the 21st century. You can't just seize other countries by force. You can't change borders with tanks. That's what led to World War II. Those were the days of Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini. We do not want to go back to that world. And I'm proud that Republicans and Democrats in Congress, between Congress and the White House, we are united on this. We are together. We're delivering a very strong message of resolve to Russia. Thank you so much.
Much appreciated again. Thanks so much. And thank you, Bodon. Appreciate you being a part of our forum. All right. Less than 10 minutes left. Let's try to fit in a couple more questions here, and I'd love to hear some closing thoughts from the Congressman before we wrap up. And, folks, I'm also going to share all of the contact information you may need if you need to get a hold of the Congressman's office or if you need assistance with casework. So grab a pen and paper if you need any of that info. Henry in Hillsborough, thank you so much for waiting, sir. You're up.
Yeah, hello. Good evening, Congressman. And I'd like to thank you for your service and the quality of your work. Really appreciate all you're doing and have done. But my question is, the Greenbrook Flood Control Project has had an adverse effect to us downriver on the Millstone River. I'm in the borough of Millstone. And the other issue there, and I wish that we could have a more comprehensive study of this area by the Army Corps of Engineers, because as you know, Ida, the one floodgate didn't get shut. And, it kind of benefited us to a degree, because I think the flooding would have been a lot worse if that gate got closed down here in the borough of Millstone. And the other issue I want to bring up is I had elevated my structure, my house. It's a historic house. I received a small grant, and I spent a small fortune of my own money to elevate this house. And lo and behold, I found out that the FEMA flood insurance rates had skyrocketed, even though I brought myself pretty much out of harm's way. And I don't understand how the underwriters can do this. And it makes it so that I'm underinsured. If you could address those issues, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
And did you? I assume you looked on the private market as well. And was it
I did.
the same?
It's a lot less money, but it's still $3,200 for me to be completely covered. In fact, I canceled my home equity line of credit as a consequence. I wasn't using it, thank God, and I could afford to, cancel it. But they wanted me to have $250,000 worth of coverage, and FEMA quoted me a rate of $17,000, and then the private rocket mortgage, rocket flooding, or Neptune. There's a few of them out there. I come up with about $3,000. So that's still sort of out of reach. But I think FEMA is really doing harm to themselves by pushing me into the private market, and probably many other people.
Yeah. Side note, I'm going through some of the same stuff, although I think not quite as bad as you. We were, my neck of the woods in Ringo's, New Jersey, was hit really hard by Ida. So the point about the effect of the Greenbrook project on the Millstone River is something I'd like to take up with you, have my team take up with you a little bit in greater detail. Obviously, I mean, I was touting the project, right? It's something that I support because that's a water system that has flooded catastrophically in the past, and with these increasingly intense storms, we know that the damage could be even greater. It came really, really close this time around to overwhelming our water treatment facility for central New Jersey in Bridgewater. And so we've got to do something. The overall thrust of the project is good, and it's going to protect hundreds of thousands of people. But if there is a side effect on Millstone or anywhere else, I want to understand that better so that we can take it up to the Army, with the Army Corps, and see if there's any solution. So if it's okay with you, I can have my team afterwards can talk to you, and we can learn more.
Of course.
And I hear you, obviously, on the FEMA and the flood insurance. There's a lot of attention being paid to reforming the flood insurance program right now in Congress, and learning more about your specific case will also help me engage on that better.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman. Yeah, appreciate you. And Henry, we have Henry and Sophia in Union, as I mentioned earlier. We're going to go ahead and have the Congressman's office follow up with you. You don't need to leave a message or do submit anything through the casework website. I think we've got enough information based on the information you gave to our operators for the Congressman's office to reach back out. So Henry and Sophia, we're going to go ahead and follow back up. You don't need to leave us a message or anything else here. Count on a call. For the rest of you, if you do need additional assistance, remember that you can go to malinowski.house.gov/casework, and the Congressman's office can assist with accessing public benefits such as Social Security and Medicare, as well as passports and visas, immigration and naturalization services, veterans benefits, or in resolving issues with federal agencies such as the IRS or FEMA. So if you need that kind of assistance, please visit malinowski.house.gov/casework or stay on the line with us here the next few minutes. I'm going to ask the Congressman to give us any closing thoughts he may have. And then when we close out the call, if you stay on the line, you'll automatically go to the voicemail system. Just please be sure to leave your name and your contact information if you need Representative Malinowski's office to call you back. So be sure to leave that contact info if you need somebody to call you back. Again, you can stay on the line to leave those voicemails at the end. One more bit of info before I turn it back to the Congressman. If you need to reach the district office in Somerville, that phone number is going to be 908-547-3307. Again, that Somerville office phone number, 908-547-3307. And Congressman, I think we've got everybody taken care of. If you can go ahead and just offer any closing thoughts and wrap up for us.
Okay. I mean, if there is any other question, I'd rather answer a question than.
Oh yeah, I can get one more in here for you. Yeah.
Let's
get
another question in. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We did have one more, and Ross, I think, in Bridgewater has been waiting for a while, so glad to get Ross in here. Ross, you're up. Go ahead.
Me. Congressman, I want to ask you about the Thompson Committee work on the January 6th. I'm very unhappy with the slow progress that I think they're making of doing this work. It's possible, of course, that the Democrats will lose control of Congress in the 22 elections. So can you tell us what the strategy is of that committee to get its work done quickly and to integrate with the Pelosi Democrat strategy for defeating Trump in the next primaries?
So I can tell you, Ross, with great confidence, I'm there and follow very, very closely what they're doing. That what they're doing is serious. It's very, very well thought out. So a lot of it is behind the scenes, right? This isn't a political process. This is not about the Democratic Party. It's a bipartisan commission. Liz Cheney is not there to help the Democratic Party. Believe it or not, she's one of the most conservative Republicans in the House. I like her, but we disagree on almost everything apart from this. And this is about making sure that that we get to the bottom of how a mob of violent people was summoned to Washington, D.C. and set towards overturning an American election by force. We need to understand that. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen again. That's all this is about. And that's a goal that patriotic Americans of both parties should support. And I can tell you, frankly, that there are plenty of other Republicans who may not say this publicly, but they are absolutely praying for the success of the January 6th Commission because they don't want to see that kind of travesty happen in the United States ever again. We should settle our differences by voting, not by violence. We should all be able to agree on that. I'm very confident that they have a good plan. I'm confident that they will finish their work by the end of this year. That is the timeline. And that we will have the information that we need coming out of this process to make sure that our democracy is strongly defended in the future. Thanks so much for raising that. And I guess I will close out because we've reached 7 o'clock, and I'll just say in closing, thank you to everybody for joining this call, for raising a whole bunch of really good and important questions. We will do this again. We'll do it by telephone. We will do it virtually on Zoom, and we will start doing it again live and in person as soon as everybody feels comfortable and safe gathering again. It's incredibly important to me to report back to you and to hear your concerns because your concerns become my priorities. Thank you all again and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you again, Congressman. Appreciate you prioritizing Q&A right up to the end there. Thank you, Ross, for our last question. And folks, again, if you need additional constituent assistance, you can stay on the line here. Leave a voicemail message with your name, your phone number, and your question or concern, whatever you need assistance with. Again, just stay on the line. Be sure you leave contact info if you need assistance from the Congressman's office. Or again, go to malinowski.house.gov/casework. Thanks again. Be well, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.